Hi, thank you for joining me on Tuesday Talks. I'm Michelle Jewsbury. Today's topic, we're going to be discussing alcohol and drug abuse with domestic violence. If this is your first time tuning in, I was involved in a domestic violence relationship for 3 years, with 1 year after that being financial and emotional abuse. So a total of 4 years cumulative. It took a lot of strength and courage and effort to leave that relationship. And because of what's happened to me, I have been now called and compelled to speak my story and to share with people. So I'm just going to start off and dive right in. The Department of Justice states that about 61% of domestic violence offenders have problems with alcohol or drug abuse. Going back on what happened with me, every time that I was physically abused, and sometimes the events lasted 4 hours, he was drunk. He was very drunk. And I'm going to call my assailant Paul. His name's going to be Paul. And I was also drinking. I don't think that there's a direct correlation between the two, but I know that when he was drunk, he had a harder time controlling his temper. When he was sober, he would emotionally abuse me, but he never physically assaulted me unless he was drinking alcohol. One of the worst beatings I got, he was blackout drunk, and we went to therapy for a year after the fact, and he said that he didn't even remember doing it. I have photographs of my face after that event, which will be in my book called But I Love Him, and that should be published hopefully early next year, where my face is black and blue. My right eye is so red that you couldn't see any white left in my pupils or irises. And he looked at me the next morning and cried, apologizing, because the cycle goes from walking on eggshells to a violent blow up, and then the apology, the I'm sorry's, the I love yous. And I forgave him for what he did, even though my bruises lasted for 3 weeks to a month, and the redness in my eye stayed for about 8 or 9 months. People would ask me often if I had jaundice, because my eye was like this yellow tint, and eventually it healed, thank God. But he looked at me that next morning, and he didn't really remember doing it, but he knew he did. And when we were in therapy, I showed him these photographs of my face, and he had told myself and my therapist that he wanted to beat up and harm whoever did that to me, and it was him. And because of his alcohol abuse, his violence went to the extreme, and he didn't even comprehend at the time what he was doing. As for me, drinking as well, it's stated that 20% of victims are reported to be using alcohol and drugs as well, and 30% were drinking heavily on that day. So I had 2 very large beatings, events is what I call them, and both lasted 3 or 4 hours, and I had been drinking with him that day, and we were out enjoying ourselves. I wouldn't say we were consuming more than we should have been, but apparently we were. And the second time we ended up staying at a hotel, a really nice hotel in Hollywood, and we went out and partied and drank and went to a baseball game and went out that night and had a couple more drinks. And then when we got back to the hotel room, he was triggered by something that I said, something that I did, something mundane. It could have been a sly comment or oftentimes he would get upset because he'd tell me to change into something beautiful or nice looking, and I would say I didn't have anything, and then that would cause him to blow up. But we both were drinking, and I will admit that. And I do think that drinking alcohol and using drugs will definitely contribute to domestic violence, but I do not think that it is the leading cause. It's said that while heavy drinkers are abusers, the heaviest drinkers aren't. So there is something within that abuser that causes them to lash out, to hurt their significant other. And there are, in my opinion, many childhood wounds, many things that they have not dealt with growing up. And it comes out as abuse and aggression, emotionally and physically, towards the people they love. And that's where I have sympathy for abusers, because in my opinion, I really think that the abusers just need help. And oftentimes these abusers won't seek the help that they need. One thing I want to leave you all with is a verse from the Bible, and it's Proverbs 20, verse 1, and it said, "Wine is a mocker and beer is a brawler. Whoever is led astray by them is not wise." What I take from that verse is, I think that God wants us to have some fun and to go out and be merry and enjoy life. But if it consumes your life and you start to hurt yourself and the people around you, it's time to get help. So thank you for joining me on Tuesday Talks, and I'll be here next week as well.